again. It's been a little while. I'm a bit out of practice, so hopefully this doesn't go too badly, but we'll see what happens. But anyway, this is a reaction to a comment that I got a while ago about Underdogs winning Worlds. And I'm not going to obviously read out the comment, I don't want to out this person, but they basically were like, every tournament, so since, I think they said since Worlds 2020, has been won by like Underdogs. And I saw that and I was just like, how is this such a commonly held view in the world in the League of Legends community? I know it is, but like it's just not true. Like everyone has sort of said that like basically since FPX's victory in 2019. To be honest, I mean even G2's in MSI 2019 it was not something you expected. Like everyone expected IG and STKT to win, but like I don't know. I feel like this is kind of a stupid like point of view if you actually watch major regions, and so I'm sort of going to explain this. It's worth saying that even my point of view is slightly revisionist on this, because I didn't watch LPL until after FPX won Worlds in 2019. So like, obviously pre that, I can't really comment. But I mean, why would I have done? LCK was comfortably known as the best league in the world. LEC and LCS were both English speaking, and it hadn't been long since the LPL got a official English broadcast. I don't actually know when the official English broadcast started, but it was quite late for the LPL. And like I would watch the odd minor region game, but like where would I have the time to watch the non-English speaking kind of boring LPL, which didn't have a big English speaking community either. But since then since I've started watching it, I've rarely been surprised by the victory of Worlds. So we'll build up to it. Obviously 2019, as I've said, 2019 MSI was a bit of a shock. 2019 Worlds, I'm just going to check I'm not covering that. I'm good. Well, that's 2020 Worlds. 2019 Worlds, again, was a bit of a shock. 2020 Worlds, which is not where the comment started. I will like come back to the comment every so often. 2020 Worlds, it was not really a shock. I mean, Damwon were very good, and they were certainly up there. FPX were, if you watched anything, FPX were probably FPX, JDG, Top, Suning. FPX were the clear favourites. Then you had like JDG, Top, Suning, Damwon, and that was about it, like as the next tier. So like to say that Damwon were an underdog is obviously insane, but this comment sort of says since 2020, so we'll go beyond that. So we'll talk MSI 2021, which is where this comment starts. In the LPL, you had the rise of PP God, but also on top of that, you had a split where the region looked incredibly solid when it came down to like basics things like skill checks, timings, and even just their decision making around objectives. Like they looked like they'd come on miles. Like at this time when watching LPL, I thought that whoever won the spring split, whether that was RNG, JDG, or EDG, like they would have to be amongst the favourites at MSI. Like obviously, LPL and LCK are almost always favourites at MSI, but like particularly this year. In LCK, we had Damwon, who had absolutely cleared the rest of LCK. Well, there was still a relatively high level of play, like the LPL, but Damwon was so clearly miles ahead. Like they hadn't really had a chance to compete against real top teams and actually be tested. Whereas RNG had proven that they could beat other top teams in the world at this point. So like it wasn't really insane to believe that RNG could beat Damwon, although Damwon were technically favourites. Yeah, I mean, I personally think at this point, if you're watching LPL, you go, okay, Damwon are marginal favourites, but like RNG are very much up there. Just on the count of by winning LPL, you had to be up there. Whereas like everyone else was sort of out of it. And NA obviously didn't make semis because NA sucks. And then we had 2021 World, so let's just make sure I'm not covering that up again. Good, beautiful. We had a similar situation for this. In fact, maybe the situation was actually worse for Damwon, as they had struggled to continue their form into the summer split. They looked pretty bad at times. Despite that, though, they had been able to maintain like some of their form from spring in a couple of the games, but they had plenty of mistakes that just hadn't appeared in the spring split. And whilst you could argue that there was some of that was from like T1 looking a bit better, Gen G looking a bit better, and Hanwha looking a bit better, like there wasn't really like a lot to say for the Damwon. They looked a little bit worse. Meanwhile, in the LPL, whilst RNG had sort of fallen off a bit, the top two teams in EDG and FPX looked really good again. FPX again had a horrific split, but that's fine. But they put in special performances in playoffs. Coming into this tournament, it would have been delusional to have not viewed FPX and EDG as amongst their favourites unless you didn't watch LPL. which is why like all the LCK fanboys, when they like saw the FPX collapse, were just like, no, there's no chance. EDG, anyone for LPL just sucks automatically. No. EDG, RNG were still very real teams. FPX was still very much a good team. They just mentally boomed like coming into the tournament. The comment that I'm talking about goes on to talk about the form in knockouts. But like, what do you mean? Sure, like EDG had to go through 5 games, but they had to be a very good RNG. They were better in like, this is going on memory rather than reviewing, but they were better in like 4 of the games against Gen.G. And like overall, they were definitely the better side in that series as well against Gen.G. Was like Damn 1T1 went to 5 games as well. And they'd only beaten Mad Lions, who were shite before that. Like, beating a European team in that year was nothing to talk home about. Like, yeah, delusional. Sure, Down 1 had looked amazing, but like, we should already have known at this point that form across 2 weeks versus actual performances was something that actually needed to be talked about. Like, actual performances across the split needed to be balanced. Like, of course, like, short-term form matters. But, like, if you've not got... Like, if you're popping off for 2 weeks, right, versus a team that's been holding the same level across the year and has had 2 bad weeks, that team that's had 2 bad weeks has a higher chance of, like, being better, I think, personally, in the next performance. So then we go on to MSI 2022. And people are going to call this... people are going to say I'm delusional here. But... Obviously, we had T1 pop off with the unbeaten split, only dropping a game in the LCK finals, which they still obviously won 3-1. But it's worth noting that whilst T1 were favourites because of this, like, they were still shocking. They have so many of the flaws now that they had back then. Like, they can't draft unless they're on blue side. They make dumb skill checking decisions. Horrific drafting as a whole, even when on blue side. Poor macro choices. And whilst the LPL looked incredible, whether it was V5 having a bit of a shock split, or whether it was more regular performers like TES and RNG, they were still underdogs. But like, if you've watched LPL and LCK, you knew that LPL could take advantage of the drafting of T1. And guess what? T1 blamed blue side not getting blue side for their loss in finals because they couldn't get their comfort picks. They just didn't know how to draft from red side, and they still don't. And nor does the rest of the region as well. It really, like, T1 was so flawed coming into this tournament. I was really happy when they lost. And people are going to say I'm T1 hate. I'm not. I love Gumagoat. I love Faker. I love Zeus. Was it Owner and Cuz at this point? I mean, I wasn't like the biggest fan in the same way that I'm not the biggest fan of any Chinese teams. Like, I'm a fans of individual players. Like, okay, when you get to EUNA, like, okay, I kind of like G2. I'm quite partial to a bit of what was Rogue is now Koi. But like, when you're talking about non-European teams, don't care. So, it's only when like they have big flaws that I hate them. 2022 Worlds, like, we had T1 coming off of a similar split, but they fell off a lot more, whereas Gen.G had dominated. And then you had the other 2 seeds, and Damwon and DRX seen as like outside chances because they always are, just by coming from the LCK. In the LPL, we saw JDG and Top Esports put in very solid seasons. Qualifying alongside them were EDG and RNG, who were like also pretty good. They put in decent splits and actually were seen as favourites ahead of Damwon and DRX. The comment, however, this was obviously the biggest upset of like pretty much all of league history. But the comment says that DRX weren't even like top 10 favourites. So let's try and talk about whether this was close to being true, because I can't imagine it. Right. It can't have been a European team who were like, so to put it in context, right, to be a not top 10 team as an LCK team, you have to be the 4th seed from your region. You have to assume that all LPL teams are better, and then you still need 3 teams better than you from outside of that. Okay, it can't have been a European team. Rogue were 1st seed, and they were very flawed. It was literally only their playstyle was like only good for beating teams that didn't know how to deal with scaling comps or didn't have the ability to do so, and that's not going to apply to any LCK or LPL teams. Maybe it was G2? Really? No. They had so many flaws. Like, for most people, they needed like at least another split to go together if they were going to compete. And you can't tell me that Fnatic and Mad were going to do anything at Worlds. They had offered nothing so far in that year. What about RCS? C9 had potential, but Jensen and Sven had serious flaws. And other than Berserker, the rest of the team was certainly not better than anyone on DRX or Damwon. 100 Thieves and OEG, they were incredibly flawed teams. There was no way they could compete. So maybe it was a minor region team. I'm not going to go through them all, but if you had watched GAM or CFO coming into the tournament, you knew they weren't going to win. So, in other words, at worst, DRX were eight favourites. And even then, I don't think that's entirely true. I think Damwon probably had bigger flaws coming into it. So, yeah. And then let's talk about this year's MSI, because he called this year's MSI an upset. Let me find the comment just so I can see. I'm not going to bring it up again, as I said. Let's see. Here we go. 2023 MSI. JDG was the only one juggernaut that managed to win as favourite. T1 crumbled and Gen.G did even worse, and BLG upset both. While GG took games off of teams out of their league. Is it that illogical to think that teams are going to choke when they've been doing so for the last years? This is the most delusional comment I've ever fucking heard. I'm sorry. This is the bit that's worst about it. I'm sorry. If you thought anyone other than JDG would win without JDG flopping, you are fucking insane. JDG were clear favourites, and then it was like a second tier which had BLG, Gen.G, and T1 like all equally like in that tier. The comment points towards BLG dropping a game against Gen.G. I'm not really sure on the relevance of this in this topic, but like BLG A inted hard that game. B, I mean, they literally drafted Lulu, which is like an LPL exclusive int, especially for BLG, while GGS got a near perfect draft for them. Despite that, BLG got 5 kills for 0 within 5 minutes. They then inted excessively from basically that point onwards, just basically forgetting everything from positioning, kiting, and how to set up a team fight. So like GGS winning that game is like completely irrelevant. Like, you can't tell me that that was particularly relevant to the conversation because BLG were just so bad. I mean, obviously I'm covering like parts of this, but like it's kind of irrelevant. This tournament, the top 2 teams finished top 2, and there's no conversation about it. And what's even more than that, right, is that like not only were JDG and BLG like definitely top 4, okay, coming into the tournament, JDG being first, like none of the teams came close. Like JGS were the only non-Korean or Chinese team to pick up a game against a Korean or Chinese team that wasn't called G2. And yet they only did it because BLG decided we're going to experiment because it's play-ins against a shit team. Like, you can't, no, it's just not relevant. 2023 MSI, there was no upset at all. There was 0 upset. 2023 Worlds, which is what I'm looking at here, there's not going to be an upset. Like, I guarantee you, as LCK or LPL team wins, and if they don't, it's going to be G2. And even then, G2 really shouldn't be in that conversation. That's it from me. You'll see more in the future. Bye.